The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.
Oh, welcome in. Campo and Joe back ready to go as we talk Jaguar football with you. We missed you last week, but we're going to kind of go into the offseason and talk about a bunch of things. Joe C. from XL Primetime, our head coach, Dave Campo. Great to see you, Coach.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here. We obviously, it's getting closer and closer.
You better believe it. And we always ask you, like, what happens between the time that you send them off for OTA or after OTAs. You got 5 weeks before you get back for training camp. And I always think, Coach, that you as a former head coach and maybe even as a position coach or a coordinator, you pray that they don't do anything dumb between then and now.
That's the last thing you say to them when they leave the building. You know, you just say, hey, look, this will be a successful off season.
Right.
As long as you continue to, stay where you're at when you leave here as far as your physical part, and don't get your name in the paper for anything that's going to embarrass the program, you, or your family.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because if you kind of treat it as that, then they kind of take ownership of it.
Right,
and
exactly.
So they think about it. They kind of visualize, man, do I really want that to happen to me?
Right.
Some of them ignore that, but most of them pay attention. All right, so I figured we would get into a couple of things today. We had a big discussion on XL Primetime yesterday about the power rankings and where Jacksonville ranks. And I want to tie that together with Doug Pederson, which we will talk about a little bit on the show today. Now, these power rankings are real subjective, Coach. You know that as well as I do. But we had a big discussion yesterday because Mike Florio, who is not the most popular guy in town, he runs Pro Football Network, and Jaguar fans think he's anti-Jags and whatever. I think he is anti a lot of things. I like Mike Florio, but he can definitely be a negative guy. Well, anyway, he puts the Jaguars 20th in the power rankings, and that is behind Pittsburgh, behind Atlanta, behind Chicago, behind Tampa, a lot of teams that, I don't know, Coach. I'm looking at this football team. I think they're better than that. I guess this is going to come down to, okay, let me see it. Prove it to me.
Yeah, that's what it's going to take. I mean, obviously, for years, people have had no good things to say about Jacksonville. Yeah. So that is the beginning part. And these national guys who, I guarantee you, Florio probably didn't see one Jaguar game last year. He has no idea.
Not in full, probably.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, there's no way they're 20th in the league because they've got one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league. And you could say whatever you want. Before that injury to Trevor Lawrence, he measured up with all of the good ones.
Right.
And so to me, I've seen it anywhere from different power rankings from 12th to now the 20. I would put them in the 12 range before I put them anywhere near the 20 range.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking around 12, and I admitted it yesterday, I said I still have concerns about really the lines of scrimmage, the ability to run, the ability to get a third down, the ability to stop the other team on third down. And I don't mind putting them outside of the top 14 right now, but I can easily come up with some numbers or whatever to back up where I think maybe one or two teams that were in the playoffs last year will take a dip and drop, and this team will move up.
Absolutely. That's the way the league works. The parity and all that is you can't pick. If everybody could pick who was going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, all down to 30, you'd be a rich man.
Yeah, I'd be.
Go on over to Vegas and say, okay, here it is.
You know how smart I am at gambling.
Yeah, stay away from it, please. But the biggest thing to me is all that stuff is based on statistics.
Yeah.
That's what it's based on. Anybody that could say that the Pittsburgh Steelers with the quarterback they've got and the Jacksonville Jaguars with the quarterback they have,
right?
They're smoking hubbly bubbly if they think that they're behind them.
It's nonsense.
It's nonsense.
Yeah. His comment about the Jags. The Jags fell apart down the stretch last year. They need to prove that it was a fluke. Okay, I get that. Right in front of them is the Falcons. They'd be even higher than 19th if they'd use the 8th overall pick on a player other than Kirk Cousins' replacement. And I sit there and I say to myself, and the Colts, by the way, are 18th. We have seen such a small sample size of Anthony Richardson coming back as their quarterback versus what we've seen from Trevor, even though we we have questions about turnovers, we certainly have seen a lot of good in his game. Anyway, you know what this does? It either creates angst or enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's a motivator or it's a downer.
Yeah.
I'm from what I know of teams and athletes, it's more motivation than downer. Mm-hmm. I would say that they're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't even look at those things with any kind of, that I don't give them any credence whatsoever, because it comes down to that football team last year was very close to being one of the top teams in the league.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to this year.
Yeah, I can't help but try and separate a few things, and we'll probably do a couple of these. Let's look at the roster from last year with other teams. Let's look at the roster going forward with other teams, because it's really the only way we can do this.
Right.
But Jacksonville did lose starters. They lost Calvin Ridley, who was a key starter. They certainly looked to him to be one of those deep threats. They didn't get it. They answered that question in the draft. They replaced a center who was a negative in Luke Fortner, and they brought in an experienced guy. They plugged what they think will be a big, strong leadership and playmaker in Eric Armstead in the middle of their defense. They get Devon Hamilton back. They said goodbye to Rayshon Jenkins, said goodbye to Darius Williams, and they made moves to counter that. And so I don't know whether all these guys are going to pan out, but they certainly found their weaknesses and addressed them.
Yeah, they did that. And to me, that's exactly what they did the year before that, 2 years before that,
right,
with Kirk and Zay Jones and Evan Ingram. That's what they did. They said, okay, the way we're going to get better is this way. So the only way I can look at it is that they're going to be a better football team this year than they were last year.
Right.
Now, how many wins that equates to, I don't know. But I look back at this past year, even the way we struggled at the end, we beat Cincinnati and we're a 10-win team and in the playoffs.
And they should have beat Cincinnati.
Exactly. So to me, that's ridiculous. It's nonsense to put them that far down. But again, I don't put any credence in it.
Yeah. All right. I'm just going to grab one more real quick and then we'll move on. But when I take a look at where some of these talking heads or different sites have Jacksonville, they're not all putting them 20th like Mike Florio is. Okay, let's get to the ESPN ranking. Post free agency before the draft, they were 15th.
Right.
So that's a spot out of the postseason because you got 14 teams. And and they put in their most improved defensive line. Yeah. Can't argue.
Absolutely.
Between Mitch Morse and Eric Armstead, you could go offensive line or defensive line.
Right.
100%. Anyway, they had the Jaguars 13th.
Yep.
Okay. And so that's a totally different thought and view of this football team by signing Eric Armstead, by drafting Mason Smith, by going out there and drafting Brian Thomas Jr., on and on and on. Now, you might have questions about a Jarian Jones selection in the third round, maybe even Mason in the second round. But this team looks like they've armed themselves with pieces that can get better. That can get better.
There's no question in my mind that we're stronger than we were a year ago, especially if Kirk is healthy.
Yeah.
Because I felt right along, you heard me say it, that anybody that doesn't think that Kirk's injury affected the ability of this team, they're wrong. Because the middle of the field was Kirk's. And they lost their middle of the field guy completely. I'm talking about down the field, middle of the field, not crossing routes and stuff like that. Ingram took care of all that.
Yeah, but you're saying post
I'm putting
corner,
post, deep crossing routes, things where that was at his best. And so that alone, plus when our defensive line, you got 2 pass rushers on the outside. Is that enough? I don't know. But I know one thing. You got 2 pass rushers on the outside.
That are good.
In the inside, you had, when they can't stop the run at the end of the season, they had no rotation in there. They didn't have guys that they could bring in and fortify themselves when guys got tired during the course of the season.
Right.
That's exactly what you just said. They brought in 2 guys plus Armstead. So they've got a rotation now, I believe, in the interior. When you can win up there, you got a chance to be pretty good in the secondary.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Darius Williams. You've heard me say that. He's a zone player. He made some plays because he's got instincts.
He made a couple of picks, and he made that great tackle on Anthony Richardson.
That's it. You can put them all in there, right there. Yeah. And then Rayshawn Jenkins. I felt that Rayshawn Jenkins was either a bomb or a bust.
For 2 years.
He missed more tackles than he made, but he made some critical plays during the season. Well, let's get a little bit more consistent. And I think the guys that they've added to this thing is going to bring consistency on both sides of the ball.
And, the other thing that I love that we get to talk and hash this stuff out, but I told Coach that I believe one of the biggest free agents they signed might be Ryan Nielsen.
Yeah, I've said that same thing.
Doing the job that you did so well for so many years.
All I know is that when a team leases their last 5 out of 6, there's something going in the locker room. Mm-hmm. And when you let the defense go, the staff, when everybody was clamoring that they thought the offensive line and the quarterback and everybody else, Ridley didn't do what he was supposed to do. Yeah. Nobody was talking about the defense. Yeah. Yet they took a dive at the end of the season. And in my opinion, when that move was made and Doug Pederson went onto the microphone and said, I know what's wrong. I know I can fix it. Mm-hmm. And then he lets the staff go. There's an issue there, whether it's between each other, between the two staffs, between the head coach and the D coordinator. I don't know what it is, but I know one thing about Nielsen. He's a teacher. Mm-hmm. And the guys they've got on their staff, Chris Richard was in Dallas when I was in Dallas doing TV and radio work. I've watched him. He's good. So in my opinion, there's been improvement made. And I think the best thing about the whole thing is that everybody's clamoring about the Colts and the Texans. The tougher the division is, the better off you are if you can navigate that division.
It's the truth, because the Colts were ahead of them by a couple of spots in the Florio Power Rankings, and the Houston Texans were 10 spots ahead of them. Actually, maybe even more than that. I need to probably look that up. But anyway, they were in the top 10, and so that is a big one too, because it does come down to knocking off the team at the top. That's what Houston did to Jacksonville. Now that's what Duval needs to do to the Texans.
Right.
All right, so let's transition here because we mentioned Ryan Nielsen and what we think he might be able to do on the defensive side. Now let's go to the head coach. And this is kind of be an open-ended discussion. We can get back to power rankings with the team a little bit later, but where does the head coach rank? Where does Doug Pederson rank among those? Now, I'm just going to give you some samples of some of the things that are being said out there, okay? At the top, you can just imagine, it's Andy Reid. Okay, what has Andy Reid done to take himself off of the top spot? Nothing, okay? Back-to-back Lombardi trophies, right? Right there with him, you got a couple of other hugely respected guys. Sean McVay, at least one ranking has him up there in that second spot. John Harbaugh, very, very good coach, third. Kyle Shanahan, fourth. Nothing wrong with that. Mike Tomlin gets a lot of love, even though it's a middle-of-the-road team.
Right, he should, because of longevity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how many times he's been without a losing record?
Absolutely.
And he gets them to the postseason.
Right.
Matt LaFleur is on the climb. Matt LaFleur, top 6, at least with this ranking, because of what he's been able to do post-Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
He turned right around and made Jordan Love look like...
Yeah.
So I can't argue with that. Dan Campbell, I love the kneecap man.
No question. What he's done.
And his GM has done a fabulous job for him in Brad Holmes. But Dan Campbell has been one of those, like Matt LaFleur, you knew he had good pedigree because he came in under Kyle Shanahan.
Right.
But Dan Campbell, we didn't really know. And that guy has done a hell of a job up there.
Absolutely.
All right, Sean McDermott, 8th.
The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.
What do you think about that? He's done a good job up in Buffalo. They are another team that is a perennial playoff performer, but they just have come up a little short.
Yeah. I think he's a really good manager. Mm-hmm. Let me put it that way. I think he does a good job, and I think they've done a good job in Buffalo of bringing guys in, and I think the GMs have a big part of that as well. So you can't argue with success. They've been considered one of the better teams in the league for a number of years now.
Yeah.
And I think that consistency probably puts him up there.
All right, stop me whenever you want to put Doug Pederson in. Zach Taylor is 9th. The Bengals continue to do good things. Heck, the way they were able to answer the bell when Joe Burrow went down, give him some credit.
Right.
Kevin Stefanski, you definitely have to give him credit. He got the Browns to the postseason with old man Flacco.
Right.
Flipping Flacco, which just drove me bananas.
Right.
And then they served one up to Houston because he finally had a bad performance. So Stefanski, killer defense, was able to overcome the Nick Chubb injury, and they played 4 different quarterbacks, Coach. Right. Mike McDaniel, 11th.
I think that's a little rich for him, to be honest with you. I think that, getting Hill was a big deal.
Oh, my, yes.
That really changed a lot. I'm not sure without Hill that he would be in that spot, to be honest with you. And he hasn't shown enough. Let me put it this way. He's been there, how long is he? 2 years or 1 year?
2 years.
He hasn't, in my opinion, he hasn't shown enough to be put that close to the top 10.
They had to battle through the Tua injuries in 22.
Right.
In 23, they made it to the postseason, but I don't believe in the end they beat anybody with a winning record.
Right.
They might have had one, but
no, I don't think they beat anybody.
Okay. And then they kind of got handled by Kansas City in the cold. But you are right. His general manager not only got Tyreek Hill, drafted Jalen Waddle, got Jalen Ramsey, did a lot of other good things, got Jalen Phillips. Anyway, they went through some injuries towards the end of last year. Let's see here. Kevin O'Connell, 12th.
And there's no way he's above
Doug
Pederson.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Yeah, and so
the guy's won a Super Bowl. Been in a Super Bowl.
No, won a Super
Bowl. Yeah.
And so Mike McDaniel and Kevin O'Connell, you and I agree, we would probably put Doug ahead of them. Sean Payton, I got no problem with that because of the resume.
Yeah, a resume. That's it. Yep.
But the Broncos were interesting last year. And look, he got rid of Russ. Right. We're going to find out whether or not he can get the job done because I view him as a really, really good coach.
Right.
Mike McCarthy.
Yeah. He won a Super Bowl. So, I mean, you can put him up there.
I dig it.
Cowboys have been very good.
Yeah.
They haven't been able to, everybody else gets dinged for not being a playoff team.
Right. He gets them there.
They're there, but they aren't doing anything. Yeah. So, I think he's probably right around where he should be.
Yeah, that defense got killed in that game last year against. All right, Nick Sirianni of the Eagles, up and down.
Yep.
But he did get him to the Super Bowl. But definitely an up and down, interesting journey that he's been on up in Philadelphia. Do you want to talk about another team that went out and procured talent? Howie Roseman did it for him.
He's good,
And then they went and got coordinators too.
Right.
So we'll find out whether he can get the job done. Doug Pederson is right behind him.
Yeah, and I will say this. After looking at wins the Super Bowl, 2 years later he gets let go, correct?
Yeah. 17 and 19,
Comes here, team goes from 0 to 9 and 8, should be a playoff team, and regresses.
Yeah.
Okay?
Fair.
So I don't think you can put him very far past where he is right now because he has been able to resurrect 2 football teams to the point of that. But has he consistently done it? No, he hasn't done that yet. Yeah. The only reason I put him up there is because you had the guy from Miami in a spot.
Yeah.
You could have easily reversed them.
Right.
Or you could have pushed the other 2 up and then have Doug Pederson behind him.
Yeah.
Like 14 or whatever it is.
Exactly. Like Sirianni is 15th. He did get him to the Super Bowl, but he and Doug had the same decline in December.
Right.
And both now.
I think you're right. Right on it.
The Eagles made it to the postseason, but then they got beat. Easily dispatched.
And you have to look at the Jaguars. When's the last time they had a winning season 2 years in a row?
It's the truth.
So I guess my answer to that would be, I don't know if I can put him ahead of any of these guys because, again, they're all subjective, right? Just like the power rankings are subjective. But I think you could put him anywhere in that 15 to 10, somewhere in there, behind somebody, in front of somebody, whatever. I think you've got a top 15 guy.
Right.
And where'd you have him? 16? Where'd they have him? 16?
Yeah.
He's in the top 15.
Yeah.
Whoever you replace with him, he's in there, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I can't argue with this. So I feel like this is such an important year for him. It's such an important year for the franchise to prove that he made the right decisions, the ones we talked about, dispatching a lot of the defensive staff. We're going to find out whether he's calling plays again, all that stuff. But he knows it's on the line.
Yes, he's either got to go this way or that way, one or the other.
Right.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, he'll be mentioned as, there goes another guy that won a Super Bowl at one place and wasn't able to get it done at the next place.
Correct.
And I think that's what a lot of these guys fight. Sean Payton will find out. Mike McCarthy will find out. These guys that have been at one stop before. All right, let's finish on this, Coach, because we mentioned the wide receivers and going out and saying goodbye to Calvin and getting Brian Thomas Jr. I got to find this number. It blew my mind. A couple of numbers from the offensive side. Trevor got his new contract, and when you take a look at the way that you had to construct the contract, Trent Baalke did a pretty dang good job to make it count as the smallest amount against the salary cap going forward as possible. And that he was going to get paid. He's now got to answer the bell. He can be the first Jacksonville Jaguar to have back-to-back 4,000-yard seasons.
Yeah.
No one else has ever done it. There's only been two other quarterbacks that have had 4,000-yard seasons in the history of the franchise.
I didn't know that.
Think about that, Coach.
Yeah.
Now, that just tells you how little has happened with this football team in terms of, the productivity at that quarterback position. When Blake went over, he was right at 4,000 yards, had 35 touchdowns. It was a losing season.
Right.
When Trevor did it, winning seasons.
Right.
And when Brunell did it all the way back in, I believe this was in 1996 when he had the 4,000-yard year, he wasn't able to duplicate it. The other one that gets me more than anything else is when you look at the other side of it, the receiving side, Christian Kirk, with just a little less than 1,000 yards receiving this year, somewhere in the 960-yard range. If he gets to 960 yards, he will go from 17th in the Jaguars' all-time receiving numbers to 4th.
Wow.
He will go from 17th to 4th, and the only guys that will be in front of him in terms of receiving yards will be Jimmy, Keenan, and Mercedes Lewis.
Wow. Well, that's some poor receiving decisions. And I go back to when I was here, the decision on Matt Jones.
Mm-hmm.
If they're taking him like that, I saw it firsthand. I mean, really, that's an amazing stat there. And I fully expect him to have over 1,000 yards if he's healthy for the whole season. Kirk is one of the better receivers we've had around here.
And he's Mr. Reliable.
Yep.
He definitely is when healthy, very sturdy, a count-on guy.
Yep.
I would think a guy who can prove there's some leadership in the locker room and on the football field. And it just blows your mind. Now, we were talking about it. There's only been a couple of guys that have gotten second contracts as receivers here. Allen Robinson wanted a big contract, but he had an ACL the year before, so the Jaguars decided not to do it. He moved on, got paid a decent amount of money to go up to Chicago, but just he wasn't a dynamic receiver the way they were hoping.
Yes.
Marquise Lee wasn't either. Right. And those were two second-rounders that they went and one they moved up to get in Marquise, and then they drafted A-Rob. And then you had Allen Hurns, an undrafted guy who got a second contract because they could sign him earlier than normal.
Right.
And then he ended up getting hurt and not doing a whole lot.
Yeah.
That wide receiver position has been thin, to say the least.
Well, hopefully the one they just took this year is going to change that stat.
That's what we need, Coach. That's exactly what we need. All right, so Doug Pederson, is he among the top half of the coaches in the National Football League? Let us know, and we'll find out whether or not this football team can get their roster back up in the top half. Dave Campo, our head coach, Always appreciate you hanging out with us. Joe C., I'll talk to you on XL Primetime, 2 to 4, right here on the Superstation.
The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.